T-Wolves let one slip away in San Antonio tonight, and I got Wolves expert Jack Borman. He's going to help us break it all down, and it's all coming up next on the Locked On Wolves POSTCAST.
You are Locked On Wolves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up? What's up? Back in the lab, back at it. Another T-Wolves POSTCAST episode right here on the Locked On Sports Minnesota Network. You got myself, Luke Inman, at Luke_Spinman. That's the man, Jack Borman. He's on Twitter, at JRBorman13. And Jack, before we get into all the action from tonight, quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more with America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Right now, new customers, you're getting $150 in bonus bets with any $5 bet. $150 when you bet just $5. Check it all out. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOnNBA. Woo! Got to take a deep breath here. Here we go, man. Tough one to swallow. You're up 15 at one point playing a team in late January that still doesn't even have double-digit wins, bro. And once again, the Wolves, common theme here the last week or two, even when they win, man, just kind of falling apart in the fourth quarter, making these things way too close at the end. They lose to the Spurs tonight, 113-112. They dropped to 32-13 on the year. Let's just start at the beginning because this was such a wild game right from the jump. It was like somebody cued the circus music up right at the opening tip-off. Crazy pace right away from both teams, chucking the ball all over, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. And with that Sports Center top 10 putback jam and bats, bro. We got bats. What's that Dumb and Dumber line? I got worms. Well, tonight I got bats, bro. Like plenty to dissect and break down. I know you've got plenty to vent about, but let's just start with something light. What was more entertaining, Ant's video game Sports Center putback or watching a mascot chase around a bat with a net for 2.5 minutes? I couldn't believe it.
I apologize for these ESPN auto plays that we're getting going here on my side. But yeah, I mean, first of all, the Spurs Coyote with the Batman costume. I loved that Jim and Michael Grady caught that right away. And
they were loving it. Yeah, they were going nuts.
All over the Batman situation there. Was it a planted bat? I don't know. But I mean, just from that moment, I mean, 1 minute and 1 second into the game, you just knew that it was going to be kind of a crazy, chaotic, off the rails game right off the rip. But man, that Anthony Edwards dunk, I think you got to go with that. That I can't think of a better putback dunk I've seen. I mean, obviously, it's hard to, go through the Rolodex of, putback dunks we've all seen in our brains right now. But that was certainly one of the best I've ever seen.
Yeah, that was unbelievable. Man, jumping around a little bit here. Just so much to go through. About 9 minutes left, I want to say. They threw up a graphic up on Bally Sports if you watch the broadcast. The last 4 games, 75 combined points for the Wolves in the fourth quarter. That's the fewest in any 4-game span by any team this year. I guess what's fallen apart the most here at the end lately, because things just don't look and feel the same like they did early on. Like, what's the one thing at the top of the list you're like, that's what needs to be fixed ASAP, first and foremost, late in games? Because this was one of the best teams in clutch time all year. In the last few games, man, the fourth quarter, been a major problem. A lot of hiccups going on late in games.
Confidence is the number one thing. I think in this game specifically, this loss, if we want to do, who's getting this loss is 100% on Chris Finch. I think myself, Wolves fans in general have been pretty positive on Chris Finch this entire season. I think he's done a tremendous job. All the players really like him. We talked about it in the last game. But some of these lineups, I mean, the lineups that he put out there specifically to start the second quarter, he put out Jordan McLaughlin, Shake Milton, Kyle Anderson, Karl Anthony Towns, and Rudy Gobert. That group of 5 played 0 possessions so far this season. They lost 11-4. They had 4 points on 5 shots, missed both their free throws, had 3 turnovers and 0 assists. So that was in the second quarter. And then Chris Finch still thought it was a good idea to go back to that same lineup, except swapping Naz Reid in for Karl Anthony Towns to put even less spacing around the Jordan McLaughlin, Shake Milton, Kyle Anderson, and Rudy Gobert quartet. And they played just 2 minutes and 39 seconds together. 2 points on 4 shots, 2 turnovers, 1 assist. They let San Antonio shoot 4 of 8 from the field. I believe 3 of 6 from 3. They allowed 2 offensive rebounds on the same possession, and the second one ended up in a Doug McDermott 3. And they lost 10-2, and it was a 2-point game right away within the first 2 minutes and 39 seconds of the fourth quarter. And when that happens, when you're a coach and I don't even necessarily blame the players in that situation, because that's a lineup that just has very limited shooting, not a whole lot of offensive confidence between Shake Milton, Jordan McLaughlin, and Kyle Anderson. It's just pretty hard to put those 3 guys on the floor together at the same time. I don't know if that was Chris Finch kind of sending a message to the front office saying, hey, come help me out. I need more to work with than this, or not. But for Chris Finch to kind of put his players behind the 8 ball like that, I think was just really poor coaching. And then beyond that, Chris Finch's body language on the sidelines looks awful. Every single fourth quarter when another team's making a run, it's a lot of throwing his arms up in the air, looking disgusted, but it just kind of looks like a guy who has no control over what's going on the floor. And that's just not something that you want to see from your coach. If you look at all the best coaches in the NBA, all those guys look extremely composed in the fourth quarter. Even if their team's in the middle of a run, they're not losing their cool. They're not kind of looking like they have no answers. They look confident. They, call timeouts at the right time. Their teams look organized after timeouts, and that didn't happen. And so I think as a coach, when your team is already struggling with confidence enough in the fourth quarter, and then you roll out that lineup, the timeouts you call are at weird times. You don't call any plays, really. The first play that I saw with my admittedly not incredibly trained eye was that double drag screen for Anthony Edwards when they were down 5. I believe it was 112-107 that Ant dribbled into a pull-up 3 to cut it back within 2. That was the first really structured play that I saw the whole entire fourth quarter. So, for Chris Finch, it was the kind of holy trinity of what not to do as a head coach in the fourth quarter. Put out a bad lineup that immediately allows the other team to get some life. You don't call timeouts at the right time, and then you're not calling any plays to try to help get your guys the ball in places that they're confident in, that they know they can score in, and that it's just really tough to win when that happens. So we'll see how they can try to remedy that in some capacity moving forward. But I think for any fan that's really frustrated with Chris Finch tonight, especially, I think those feelings are certainly validated after what we saw in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, well said. I know you guys recorded an episode of the Basketball Party on Wednesday, like you do every week, and Sam Ekstrom was trying to gauge the room as far as like how worried everyone was after losing to OKC and then Charlotte back to back. And I feel like you were one of the only guys who kind of stood up and basically said, "Hey, let's pump the brakes here. Let's not overreact. Still a first place team at the time, anyways. Still a 30-win team here. Obviously, you don't want to lose games, but the biggest things that are going wrong are fixable for the most part. They've got the talent, and at their core, this is still a really good team. They're going to be fine." Bigger picture, I guess, how much has changed for you now that we've watched them, even in their wins, like the Wizards and Nets? Like they just don't look like the same exact team that we're used to seeing. I guess, has your temperature changed at all with how this team's looked the last week or so? Like, are the nerves running thin yet, or are you still, hey, it's a long season, it's a grind, a lot of ebbs and flows, and confident this is maybe just a speed bump or a phase, and they'll bounce back just fine?
So I just watched the Netflix movie called Dumb Money, which was about the GameStop
shorting the stock and everything. Yeah, can't wait to watch that. Yeah.
Everybody was kind of sitting, should we hold? Should we hold? Should we sell and take our profits? What should we do? And everybody is kind of saying, we got to hold the line. We got to wait and see what Katie's going to do, but we're going to hold the line. And it's kind of one of those situations, right? That's a great, if anybody's remotely interested in business or finance or, wants a fun Netflix recommendation to get this game out of their head once they're done watching this, I'd certainly recommend
Love
that.
It.
But it kind of reminds you of that, right? I think you want to have some faith and belief in what we've seen so far and all the positive return on investment we've seen, but you also don't necessarily want to let that stop you from kind of admitting to yourself what you're seeing. And I think, again, it's tough, right? Because you want to assume that you're going to have Mike Conley in the playoffs and that Mike Conley will be there to help get things organized in a way, just slow everything down, get the ball out of Ant's hands, run a play, something. And this is now the third game that they haven't had Mike Conley at the controls in the fourth quarter, the Boston game, the Charlotte game, and now this game. So you have to at least take that into account, right? That he's your most important floor organizer, run a play guy that you have. Again, we mentioned on the last basketball party that he's also their best spot up 3-point shooter, right? And so that certainly matters in terms of spacing, which has been a core issue for this team in the fourth quarter. But I'm concerned just with the confidence, right? I think it doesn't really matter which players you have on the floor when all those guys are kind of thinking about these last few games that they've had. And then you not only think about that, you think about the fourth quarter troubles they had all year last year for a lot of the guys that are still in the rotation, that were in the rotation when that was going on. And then 2 years ago in the playoffs, you blew a 25-point lead twice in that Memphis series, which is pretty much unprecedented. And that's just kind of woven into the fabric of the Chris Finch, Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns trio. And I think you're just reopening some of those old wounds. And I think it becomes a mental battle at a certain point, right? And so for fans that are clamoring for trades for a shooter or a backup point guard or another scorer off the bench, I don't necessarily know that that's going to remedy the issues that we're seeing right now. Because when it's a mental issue, right, there's not a whole lot that I can say or you can say or any of us can say of, hey, this is how you fix things, right? I think the only suggestion that I can offer is that you'd like to see more structure in the fourth quarter, whether that's starting everything the same way, right? Whether that's, starting the ball, maybe it's in Karl Anthony Towns' hands and you get Anthony Edwards off the ball to start and he has a handoff and it's kind of this handoff and pop where Karl's shooting and you at least, make it tough for the defense to put two on Anthony Edwards and you get the ball moving or you get Ant a head of steam going downhill instead of, Ant walking the ball up the floor every single time and then just taking a Rudy Gobert screen and then it's 8 seconds of dribbling, right? Like there's ways that you can get into the offense differently, even if you're not running a super, detailed step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 play that ends in a desired result of we want to get a shot for Karl Anthony Towns or we want to get a shot for Jaden McDaniels or something like that. And we're just not seeing a whole lot of that, right? I haven't obviously gotten a chance to go back and watch the film of this fourth quarter, but I'd imagine that more than half of the possessions that Anthony Edwards was in the game for was just him walking the ball up the floor and Rudy Gobert setting a screen and then not much else happening after that. I mean, wasn't that what you saw?
Oh, yeah.
In the fourth quarter?
Oh,
so I think for me, it's just varying the ways that you initiate the offense to at least make the defense work in different ways. If the defense is working in the same way, it's just a high ball screen for Anthony Edwards and he's dribbling and, 3 guys are just sitting there watching, not having to do any work, and you're still getting a stop. That's just going to feed the confidence for the other team more and more and drain the confidence of the Wolves. But then when you think about the fact that the other 3 guys on the floor, in this case, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Karl Anthony Towns, and Jaden McDaniels, are barely even touching the ball in the fourth quarter. When the ball then does come to them, and it's even later on in the quarter, right, you're just out of rhythm. It's really hard to make a shot when you haven't really touched the ball much for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 possessions in a row, right? And then on the other end of the floor, you have the Spurs who made 10 shots in a row at one point in the fourth quarter, and some of them were really hotly contested shots. I mean, it's just a confidence killer at that point on both ends of the floor. And until the Wolves are able to regain some semblance of confidence or get it to 20, 25, 30 points at the end of the third quarter to where it is like almost statistically impossible for the other team to come back.
Right.
I think that this could be a recurring problem for a little while until the Wolves are able to overcome it. And I think if you want to poke holes in the Wolves, obviously you can talk about this fourth quarter. But then you can also talk about the fact that the Wolves really haven't done a great job this season, despite how, good they've been in terms of their offensive defensive efficiency for the whole game, for the first 3 quarters. But they haven't really just blown out a ton of teams to a point where you can rest your starters for most of the fourth quarter. And the game is pretty much out of question at the end of the third quarter. Because if the game's at 15, that's not really out of the question. I'm talking 25, 30-point lead. And we just haven't seen a whole lot of that this season.
Is that them just letting off the gas then late in games? Or is there more to it than that?
I think it's really difficult for the Timberwolves to just string together.
It's just not their identity. It's just not their MO.
Yeah, I think that they've had one really good quarter or one really bad quarter instead of 3 really solid quarters, if that makes sense. And that makes it where, they still may win comfortably. They still may win by 14, 17 points, but it's just not 4 quarters of sustained, really strong play. I think for the Wolves, it's more about a quarter and a half here, half a quarter there. And then the scoreboard is what it is at the end of the game, if that makes sense.
It does. Plenty more deep dive from this one, including Naz Reid and Shake Milton coming off the bench and their impact tonight, what that'll look like. That's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to you by BetterHelp. What are some things you want to keep the same about yourself or about your life in 2024? Where are you already crushing it? Maybe try ditching all the New Year's resolutions and start expanding on what you already do right. Maybe that's organizing the closet or the garage. I know that's something that I'm terrible about. Well, therapy can help you find your best strengths and maximize your own specific skill set so you can finally ditch the extreme resolutions. Instead, therapy can help you make changes that really stick over the long term once and for all. If you've been thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and it's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited for your time frame. And it's so easy. Guys, all you got to do, fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched up with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time at no additional charge. It's time to start celebrating the progress you've already made. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, man. You kind of touched on it already. I'm just curious, man. Let's talk about the bench play here for a minute, specifically Naz Reid and, Shake Milton. Hey, maybe the best game he's had since early December. Obviously, that's not saying much. The bar was super low. Some people in the stream, though, saying maybe Finch was forced to play him because of the front office and they're maybe trying to pump up his trade value a little bit. I know you kind of already touched on it, but different rotations going on tonight. Let's see. There was, maybe off the top of your head a little bit better instead of me spending time and trying to find them, but just some weird rotations. Slow-mo, J-Mac, Naz, Rudy, and Shake. Like just some weird, it's just stuff we haven't seen this year. I just want you to break that down a little bit more in depth and what you saw and what you think the mindset or game plan was from some of those rotations and looks.
Yeah, we talked about it the other night as well. And Andres has it there. That was the lineup that I talked about right off the top of them just, not giving them a chance in the fourth quarter to start the game. But one lineup that I did like that they got to was Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Shake Milton, Jaden McDaniels, Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert. You're just getting some more shooting in there around Shake Milton, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Rudy Gobert, which I really liked. We haven't seen that lineup very much. And then another one that they played in the first quarter that I really enjoyed was Shake Milton, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Kyle Anderson, and Naz Reid. That was a +7. That was how they closed that first quarter. Pretty much they're a +7. And that was when Ant kind of went nuclear. Naz Reid, that was part of that. I believe it was a 10-0 run for the Wolves. It started on a Naz Reid 3, and then you had the Ant dunk. You had a couple more nice things from Ant. But yeah, for Shake Milton specifically, I definitely think that, Shake Milton is kind of the next guy up in the rotation anyways, even if Mike Conley is out, right? Because now that Jordan McLaughlin is in the rotation, Nickeil Alexander-Walker is already in the rotation. It makes sense that those two guys are going to slot into that kind of number 1 and number 2 kind of guard initiator spots. And they've kind of had 3 now in the rotation for the last 3 weeks to a month, whenever Jordan McLaughlin came back in the rotation. So it makes sense that then Shake Milton would kind of step into that Jordan McLaughlin role of that reserve point guard. So I think it's part that, but I definitely think that Shake Milton is being played a little bit more ahead of the trade deadline. So other teams are kind of able to see what he's been able to do. We've seen it now with the Clippers with Bones Highland playing a little bit after not playing for well over a month. So that's kind of a similar situation there ahead of the trade deadline. But it was really nice to see Shake Milton play probably his most productive stint that he's had in the last month or so in that second, late first quarter, early second quarter when I believe Shake Milton had, I think he had 7 points, a couple of assists, 7 points on 3 of 5 shooting. He took a charge as well right after he got in the game, which was really important. And look, like Shake Milton is a guy that's had a ton of NBA experience. He's played in the playoffs with Philly. He's been a really high floor guy for Philly for 4 years. And so I honestly kind of like, regardless of the trade deadline, trying to get back to Shake Milton a little bit. I think, in some of these, I think he makes sense in a lineup that has a lot of spacing, right? So the lineup that I talked about where you have Ant, you also have Jaden, you also have Nas, right? You have 3 shooters around him. I really like that. But in the fourth quarter, right, when you're getting to a lineup that's got Jordan McLaughlin, Jordan McLaughlin, Rudy Gobert, and Kyle Anderson around them, I think that's just really tough because Shake also is pretty good at driving, using his physicality and finishing inside. We saw a lot of that in Philadelphia, but there's just no spacing in a lineup like that for him to be able to do that. So I would really like to see Shake Milton, at least in between now and the trade deadline, if they do decide to keep him in lineups with guys like Carl and Naz Reid in the front court together, then maybe having a Kyle Anderson out there with him that can, playing a little bit of handoff action, playing a, 5-out system or 4-round-1 with Kyle and the dunker, those types of things. But certainly I do think that him being back in the rotation has to do with the trade deadline coming up and that. But it was also nice to see Naz Reid get back to looking like Naz Reid a little bit. He had 5 points in 3 straight games.
Yep.
Tonight had 13 points, 5 of 12 shooting. Would like to see a little bit better efficiency inside the arc, as he was just 3 of 7 inside the arc. But he was really big in that fourth quarter. Had a couple of big shots, including a big 3. Had that really tough drive to just kind of break the seal off the basket, help the Wolves see the first one go down. As a guy who's just not scared of anybody, not scared of any moment, isn't going to let his confidence waver. And so it's definitely one of those guys I think you'd like to have out there to try to help, stem the tide a little bit with some of this fourth quarter confidence issues. But for the two of them, I mean, I think the Wolves had like 17 bench points in the first half. They only had 7 in the second half. And again, Kyle Anderson, 4 points on 6 shots and only had 1 assist. I mean, if Kyle Anderson's not really going to be, moving the ball, getting everything going, organizing things, having assists like he has been recently, I think he's had like a 16-2 assist to turnover ratio the last 3 or 4 games, which is obviously great where you don't need him to score as much. But if you're not getting that playmaking and you're not getting the scoring, then it's just really tough to play him, honestly, regardless of how good his defense is. Just with how bad the Timberwolves spacing has been in some of these lineups. And again, another thing, I don't know if anyone in the chat has talked about this, but Troy Brown Jr. not really being in the rotation at all. Tells me a couple of things. It tells me I don't think the Timberwolves are looking to trade him at the trade deadline if they're not already playing him kind of a la Shake like we were talking about earlier, but they need more spacing. And the fact that some of these lineups, I understand that Finch is prioritizing defense, and understandably so, since that's the identity of this team. But Troy Brown Jr. played pretty darn well when he was in the rotation for the most part over that 2-3 week span, late November into early December. And he's a guy that's professionally has been in the league 7 or 8 years now. Even though he's still pretty young, a guy that you can totally trust to come in and make a couple of shots or make the right plays, help get the ball moving, attack closeouts, kick to the opposite corner, those types of things. And so the fact that he hasn't gotten a look, even in some of these games where they just really need more offense, is a little bit puzzling to me. And again, adds to this layer of Chris Finch in the rotations and some things we'd certainly like to see get cleaned up here moving forward.
How about Ant's night? I know you already touched on it, but okay, he had a couple turnovers in the second half that he wants back. Goes into halftime, though, 6-1 assist to turnover ratio. Love to see that. Lights out from the floor, just super efficient every time he touched the ball, 66% field goal percentage. And then you add in the rebounds on top with six. It was just awesome. At 32 points, 12 assists, 6 boards total, Sports Center dunk of the night. But when you lose the game, and he'll be the first to tell you this, none of it matters. What's with the recent hesitation going on in the fourth quarter? I know you just preached confidence. It feels like this whole team's lost some confidence. But why would Ant, out of all people, lose his confidence? I guess maybe I'm oversimplifying things, but just talk to me about, his great shooting night, obviously, but how much more aggressive you'd like to see him be late in those games in the clutch moments.
Yeah, I think for me, another way to put it is confidence in the process, right?
Sure.
If you're a football player and you don't have a whole lot of confidence in the plays that are coming into your helmet, right? Or the plays that are coming in the huddle, right? You're probably not going to play as well. And I think the Timberwolves just don't have any confidence in their process right now. I think Anthony Edwards is just pressing too much. That was certainly not the case for Ant in the fourth quarter tonight. I don't think, he was the reason at all why they lost.
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt you, but has something changed then in the process? You equate it to football. I know football a little bit better. I'm like, okay, all right. So they changed the game plan this week, or on a game-to-game, night-to-night basis, things change. Is that what it was? Or
I think it's, plays when, in the fourth quarter, right? You're playing not to lose instead of playing to win, right?
Yep.
The Vikings had a lot of situations. They're up 10, 14 points second half, and Kevin O'Connell just ran a bunch of let's play not to lose football calls instead of, let's continue to do what worked in the first half, continue to run plays, initiate the offense in different ways, get guys the ball in different spots, these types of things. And that just hasn't happened in the fourth quarter. And it's been a lot of guys just watching Ant dance with the basketball. And he was, still pretty efficient, 3 of 5 in the fourth quarter, 8 points, only 1 turnover. You'll take that from Ant in the fourth quarter, certainly, especially without the 5-0 run that he had late. But I think the biggest thing for Ant tonight, is to not let that last possession put a bad taste in your mouth, right? For Anthony Edwards to get the ball in the backcourt with 7 seconds left, leisurely walk into a double team. A lot of times when you see stars, especially a guy like Ja Morant is one that comes to mind. They like to get the ball to him in the backcourt. So he has a full head of steam to just, jetpack his way to the rim. And for the Wolves to bring Rudy Gobert that far away from the basket to set a screen to kind of invite a second defender, I didn't love that. I didn't love Rudy Gobert being on the floor in the last possession in general. I would have liked to see Naz Reid out there to give them maximum spacing and another shooting option. And a guy who's not afraid of the moment. But for Ant, what I really liked was that his playmaking sustained for the whole game. I think we've seen a lot this season of Anthony Edwards having individual quarters where he's got 4 or 5 assists, maybe in the first quarter or the second quarter, and then he only has 1 or 2 assists for the rest of the game. And I think tonight, like you said, he had 6 assists in the first half, had 6 more in the second half. He had 12 assists tonight. I believe that is a career high for Anthony Edwards, breaking his previous high of 11. And for him to only have, 3 turnovers tonight? And 2 of them were just, oh my God, Wembanyama's right there. Those aren't things that you're going to see for the rest of the season. That I think it's certainly not something I'm going to hold against him. But I really like the way that he balanced his scoring and his playmaking really nicely in this one. I thought he kept the defense off balance with the way he was attacking to score and also attacking to create for others. And what I mean by that is Ant really likes to get to certain spots on the floor where he can jump and make corner kick passes or get to certain spots on the floor, like the elbows, where he knows that there's going to be a help defender and he can draw that help defender in and then make a pass out to a teammate, either for a 3 or for them to be able to drive the lane and then finish inside or keep the ball moving and keep the defense scrambling. And I thought he did a great job all night. Tonight, he was great passing the ball from the middle of the floor. And that's something you just want to see, him be able to continue. And, 32 points on 12 of 18 shooting, right? That's obviously great. But then when you look at his assists, right? He had 12 assists. What I really like is that 10 of them came inside the arc. And that
interesting.
It was a lot of, finding other guys. He had 4 assists to Carl, which is something we saw a lot of 2 seasons ago and not quite as much with the introduction of Rudy Gobert. He had 2 more assists to Rudy Gobert tonight, which is what you want. And then had 2 assists to Naz Reid, which again, situation where passing to Naz Reid, and he's doing a great job of then attacking a scrambling defense off the dribble, right? And so I'd really like to see that from Ant. And when you think of the fact that, he had 58 points that he created tonight, 38 or 32 he scored, and 26 he assisted off of, which I don't know if that's a season high off the top of my head. It's something that takes a little bit of time to look up. But I would imagine that that's right there in one of his 2 or 3 best games of the season. And so I don't really blame Anthony Edwards for much of anything in this game. That last possession was honestly disappointing, but one of the best games of his season so far, and one that I think he should certainly feel good about going into a really important game against Oklahoma City on Monday, especially when you consider that coming into this game for Anthony Edwards, he just hadn't been Ant, right?
Right.
He had 8 assists and 7 turnovers in his last 2 games. And then shooting the ball, he's 19 of 51, 37% in the last 2 games, even though he's had some really good scoring numbers, and he was only 6 of 17 from 3. But tonight, again, 32 points, 12 of 18 shooting. He was 6 of 10 inside the arc. He was 6 of 8 outside the arc. So just a really good shot mix for Anthony Edwards. I thought he took a lot of really efficient shots, made good decisions with the basketball. So certainly one of his better games this season. It's just a bummer that, the Timberwolves weren't able to get enough from other guys, and Chris Finch wasn't able to string together rotations that made sense and was able to help get this one at the finish line before the Spurs were able to take the lead.
Yeah, you don't want to say wasted game and performance. Not wasted, but obviously just not the same. Doesn't hit the same, right, without the win. Obviously, Karl Anthony Towns knows that better than anybody, putting up 62 and, obviously getting a loss for Charlotte as well. Good breakdown, though. Love that. Quick look at the rematch versus OKC coming up on deck before we get out of here. And that's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more with America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Right now, new customers, you're getting $150 in bonus bets when you place any $5 wager. That's $150 in bonus bets when you throw down just $5 on any bet. You don't even have to win. This promo was made for a guy like me. I know you're going to love it too. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, no better time to get in on all the action. The app, so easy to use, and they got everything you need. Money lines, parlays, prop bets, over-unders, you name it, they got it. FanDuel's got everything you need to bet on the entire NBA season, and it's by far the easiest and simplest betting app to use. Go check it out for yourself. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon today. America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel, official partner of the NBA. All right, schedule coming up in the next few games now. OKC, that'll be their 4th road game in a row. By the way, what the Spurs did, I wish we had enough time to talk about the Spurs. I always like to take a quick 60 seconds, talk about the opposing team. What the Spurs just did, playing on the back end of a back-to-back, they had OKC and then the Wolves tonight. What they just did, man. Greg Popovich, man. I wish we had more time. OKC, though, that'll be their 4th road game in a row. Back at home then for 3 straight, Mavs, Magic, Rockets. All right. Obviously, OKC is the one on everyone's mind when you see that stretch there, right? But how much does one win change the whole perception of this team, get their swag back? You talked about confidence so much at the top of the show. Get their confidence back with a win. I just want your sneak peek preview here real quick before we get out of here. What you're looking forward to the most and what the Wolves' probably biggest challenge is going to be then Monday night. And again, what a win would mean for just the psyche of this team right now.
Yeah, I think it would be huge, right? We thought that they might have turned a corner with their last win over Brooklyn, just to kind of get 2 in a row again, feel good coming into another game that you thought you would have won. All right, you've got 3 wins in a row, kind of a good on ramp to this Oklahoma City game, but now I think that this team's just going to have a different level of focus, right? And they've got to know that it doesn't matter what we do in the first quarter, second quarter, or third quarter if we're going to play this way in the fourth quarter. And I think trying to have a heightened sense of awareness of valuing every possession will be important against an Oklahoma City team that is excellent at turning other teams over. They're excellent at scoring points off turnovers. They are an excellent pass break team. I think that they're very good at a lot of things the Wolves struggle with. And so in those types of games, you already have to have more attention to detail, kind of adhere to the game plan as best you can, probably focus on those things more than you would in any other game. But I'm really intrigued to see the Anthony Edwards versus Shai Gilgeous-Alexander matchup, especially after some of the post-game comments Ant had, some of the social media posts that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has made in reference to said post-game comments, and the way that this will kind of be built up. But I think it does lose a little bit of its luster now that the Wolves are slipping a little bit. But I really want to see the Wolves get big and dominate inside. They're much bigger than this Oklahoma City team. Oklahoma City is one of the 3 or 4 worst rebounding teams in the league. So if the Timberwolves can sustain their rebounding, which is something that they've done very, very well over the last 10 games or so, I think that that's going to be really important. Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert have been the best rebounding duo in the league over the last week, 10 days. And so you really hope that they'll be able to kind of hit the offensive glass hard and create some second chance opportunities, because this Oklahoma City half-court defense is very good and one that's going to be very difficult for the Timberwolves to score on. And so they're able to generate some more offensive looks through second chances. That'll be really important, but got to limit turnovers, got to create second chances, and got to run Oklahoma City off the 3-point line. They're a team that can get pretty hot from 3 if you don't run them off and don't pay attention to shooters. And that's exactly what happened the last time they were in Oklahoma City, when that game was pretty much over early in the second quarter with the way Oklahoma City was shooting it. So certainly you'd like to make sure that it's a 4-quarter game and they'll be in it right at the end with a chance to go win it.
Yeah, well said. Wolves let this one slip away on the road versus the Spurs, 113-112. They dropped to 32-13 on the season. Back on the road versus OKC, and the Thunder tip-off on Monday, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. As always, huge shout-out to everyone that joined us in the postcast. We'll be back each and every game, same time, same place right here. Go check out the brand new basketball party episode. Sam Ekstrom, Gophers legend Ron Johnson, Carol Evans, Reggie Wilson. New episode that just dropped a few days ago. Ben Beacon ripping it up over on the Locked On Wolves podcast each and every day as well. That'll do it for us tonight, though. He's Jack Borman. I'm Luke Inman on Twitter, @Luke_Spinman. Until next time, signing out.